What's up, my Yugi Bros? Welcome to round 2 of the Moth week. Last video we tried Relinquish against it in 3 matches. Unfortunately, it did not win the 3 matches. It won 1 of the 3 matches. So this time we're going to try 3 matches of Amazons against it. Keep in mind, we've been playtesting a lot of different decks to try to deal with this the best way possible. So even if they do lose the match, at least you can see something that has potential, you know, or gives you ideas to kind of like evolve from those ideas. So even if, like, for example, Relinquish didn't win the last video, but still gave a run for its money, a lot of matches, a lot of close games, you know, so at least you can see what we can compete with. And hey, even if we can't beat the all-powerful Moth deck, at least we can try to give it a show. So this time we're going to be doing Amazons. As I said, it's a little bit different variation. We're not playing so much of the Amazoness stuff. We're actually just playing more spell and traps. I was originally going with a warrior variant, but the warrior variants, the warrior monsters themselves, don't really do a whole lot. Something like Sage, for example, here puts a lot of pressure on this deck. It kind of has to go off. If it has the Nightmare Wheel, it has to stop this card, otherwise you're going to lose precious back row to this thing, which is really strong. In other situations where they start with like Zoma and Dust Tornado, Sage just completely wipes out one of their 2 options, which is really nice. And like I've said before, this is a numbers game. It's all about the numbers. So unfortunately, in situations like these, you're going to have to play different cards that kind of net them or net you advantage, but also hurt them. So like Sage isn't very strong, but getting over something like this, normally they would just let this go and have Midoriya kill it, but they wouldn't want to risk losing their wheel, so they had to wheel it. Which also, we're playing Twisted Personality in here, kind of taking advantage of their burn, making it our burn. But also we have Swordswoman, which does its own burn, and, you know, Zoma and Nightmare Wheel, of course. They're going to have Midoriya swing in here to our monster. Anything on Tac Deck, we say no. They're going to equip Paranoid's quick effect to Doria, destroying our Sage. Doria has to be chain 1 because it's mandatory. Paranoid to be chain 2, summoning the Moth. And then we lose our monster, and they attack directly with 3500, which it would be game, but we have the offerings. Obviously, it's pretty early, but that's what happens when you brick with both the Moths. You kind of have to play around it. Unfortunately for us, however, we can't really do too much, considering we couldn't draw. Twisted will then use its skill to discard another card from their hand, but that's fine and dandy. The whole point is they need to put a Moth back in the deck, so they'll do so with shuffling to draw a card. They'll set the Dekoichi they drew. End phase, we're going to Zoma. Like I said in the last video, I'm not going to do too many play-by-plays, or at least not as much as I would in the past. I want to get these 3 matches in as fast as possible, but I also want to show you guys like what each deck can do. And I'm not going to not explain things. If I feel I need to, I definitely will. So Sage is putting in work here. They're going to put the Noid on the Zoma. We're going to Dust Tornado that. Keep in mind they can only do this effect once per turn, so if we get rid of it, then they're stuck on not being able to do it until the next turn, which is nice for us. So just straight getting it off the field is really good. We open another Wild Tornado, so if they have another way to do it in the future, we can stop them. They're going to Dust Tornado the Zoma here. They have to do that preemptively, because otherwise it's going to pop this. So like I said, cards that apply pressure. Like Sage definitely applies pressure, but Swordswoman also applies pressure by inflicting all damage back to them. Here they go again with the Paranoid. We're going to Wild Tornado that. However, that does leave their Nightmare Wheel susceptible. Unfortunately, we don't have enough counters to flip here or get it to destroy it, but they will put a 3rd counter on our Twisted. And I feel like if you're not playing a deck that has a specific skill like Rituals with Relinquished or something of that nature, Twisted Personality is just the best way to deal with this deck. I tried out It's My Lucky Day for Dice Foon for extra spell and trap destruction, but that leaves you more susceptible to life point damage, especially with the 1,000 you have to pay. Here's a perfect example of where this card ends up putting in. Well, it didn't really matter because we had offerings, but even so, if this comes out, it has to be in defense mode. If they have other back row, Sage will just destroy it. So we actually took game 1, which is really nice for us. Like I said, back to the whole, I wanted to play Warrior Turbo, like the old Warrior Turbo. Was going to be Gearfrieds in the main deck, so that the Moth would equip to it and then fall off of it. But that does kind of give them the option of if they have this in hand, they can summon it. But also, unless your whole deck is geared towards that, or you just want to sit on the one Gearfried, you really can't make huge progress. And as soon as you put any other monster on board, that's the one they just use Paranoid for. So Gearfried by itself after that fact didn't really do too much. And I tried Blade Knight too because, you know, getting rid of like this effect is really key. But again, you have to only have Blade Knight and no other monsters for that effect to successfully negate the draw, and then it's not really worth it in that. So, and charging Gaia does nothing against this deck, so slowly but surely I was swapping them out for Sages and then Swordswoman's, and then I just found myself putting it as an Amazon deck instead. So here's another example where they brick both Moths, but like I said, like I showed last game, like they can easily break out of having both Moths. This skill is just insane. Like, I've never been an advocate for Speedos to have a ban list as of yet, but if you were going to ban any one thing, I would say ban Cocoon of Ultra Evolution. Obviously that does kill the deck, but it doesn't kill the consistency. It's better than putting Paranoid to 1 or banned, because Paranoid can still do a whole lot. There's still Hyper Metamorphosis as another skill to summon Perfectly Ultimate Great Moth. Granted, I'm not sure you'd play it at that point, but something like Paranoid can still be good in an insect deck, and I wouldn't want to render that useless. But also, I wouldn't, like, this would still be alive. This is the only problem. It's just everything in this skill, they're both once per duel, but they're not once per turn. Like, you can use both in the same turn, which is kind of insane. And the advantage it nets you like that is kind of ridiculous. Here we forgot the Zoma at the end phase, so we're going to do that, and then we draw. But like I said, it's one of those things where it's just, you have to go off. You have to get all the advantage. You have to blow up through their back row. You have to stop, like, and there's so much at stake here. And I understand we probably won't get a ban list. I'm not a huge advocate of us getting a ban list. In all honesty, I think we're fine where we're at. It's not overly destructive where we can't steal wins. It is insane, but, you know, you can fight through it. But even if it gets to a point where it gets very stale because of that, they already confirmed Jinzo for the next set. So Jinzo by itself, as long as you can always stick it on the field, will be huge against this deck, because if you stop its traps, I mean, all it has running for it is its one skill, and if you can play around that, then you should be okay. They're gonna allure here, hit a dark monster. I think the plan was, the nice part about allure in this deck is you can fail its effect and discard these to the graveyard and then shuffle one back into the deck, and then if you hit the Paranoid, then the skill is live again. And it's crazy to think that Allure's downside effect actually helps you out. But like I said, perfectly for this game, like, it's not that we played around everything, it's that they bricked with both Moths. So all we had to do is play through one Zoma every turn. We just tornadoed the first one. We have an offerings for this one. They're going to try to crash for game. We're going to flip offerings, destroying it. So at this point we have the high ground, but unfortunately it's only due to the fact that they bricked with both Moths. Granted, they haven't hit the Paranoid this game, so it's not like that's been dead, but still, you need to get it at a disadvantage. But it's really hard to get this deck at a disadvantage when it has so much advantages. The only downside to this deck is, I guess, sitting here on dead Moths, not being able to capitalize off of your skill. If we can do that, then we can play the numbers game and easily win. Conveniently, they're not drawing Paranoid here, so it's not really hurting them. They're just playing the deck the normal way you would. But like I said, once again, Sage ends up being really good here. The skill ends up also being really good here, getting rid of their Nightmare Wheels, so we don't just straight lose. So it's one of those things where if you can keep them on that, then you're fine. Again, here, perfect example. They have to Nightmare Wheel the Sage, so they're going to take more damage off the Zoma, but they have to stop this, otherwise it's just going to pop it. This deck whatever you're playing against Moth, you need to apply as much pressure as possible. If you don't have the pressure, then you're not going to win the game. It's just as simple as that. And a lot of decks right now in Speed Duels don't have the kind of pressure that Dark Moth as itself can, do. Obviously, you have the Moth, you have the traps, you have Gap if you summon that, you have the Koichi extra draw, you have Allure extra draw, you have Midoriya wiping the board. blow for blow, so at least, your cards will replace themselves. A lot of decks and speed duels just don't have that type of abilities right now. If you can slowly whittle away their resources, it just shows you how powerful the deck is. And as it is, Dark Moth does nothing but whittle away at anyone's defenses. It's just that simple. So that's the first match in a nutshell. Both matches, they opened 2 Moths. The first game they played out of opening the double Moth. The second game they never did. They never hit the Paranoid. So we played against what is normally just the Stark deck, and as long as we continue to hold advantage, we succeeded. However, they got us to 300 life points, so it's not like it's just that easy. You just play the game and that's it. Like, you still have to play through all this BS. We almost lost the game, so it's real tough, even still, without this being their auto win con. So match 2, starting it off with our 2 back row. We're not going to summon a monster. Oh, I'm sorry, I fast forwarded that a little bit. Well, we're not going to summon a monster. There's no reason to, because that just gives them the ability to Paranoid, so they're just going to set 2 traps and pass. And we draw into Floodgate, we summon the Sage, and Sage will slowly have to make them fight for it. And the thing is, here's a perfect example. They have 2 Zomas. If we swing and do 14 to them, one of these will die. So we'll take the 14, but we'll get rid of both of their Zomas. Like I said, it just apply the pressure as fast as possible. Put them in that spot. But it does get rid of both Zomas. Alternatively, they could have just let it go and kept a Zoma. They're going to Allure of Darkness, banishing the gap, using the Paranoid. We're going to Wild Tornado that. We are main decking Wild Tornado. I'll show you guys the list at the end. I feel like you need some type of extra main deck to deal with this deck. It's too good otherwise. We're going to draw into Wheel. We're going to swing with Sage once again. They're going to Nightmare Wheel that. But beautiful part about Twisted Personality is that their Nightmare Wheels become extra fodder for our skill, which is beautiful. This time their Paranoid's going to resolve. They're going to summon the Moth. We're going to flip Floodgate Trap Hole, which is real strong here. We're going to end phase Nightmare Wheel the Perfectly Ultimate, which is stuck face down. They're going to take 500 off their skill, so we have 3 counters. We're going to remove 2 to discard the card from their hand, since this isn't a threat right now because I can't flip. We're going to set 1. We're going to have Swordswoman swing into Perfectly Ultimate, but they're going to Nightmare Wheel that. Reason we do that is because this will flip face up, and they'll take 15 to the face because of its defense. And they shouldn't be able to switch it to attack mode based off Floodgate's wording, but even if they could, Nightmare Wheel prevents them from changing its battle position anyways, so it's going to be stuck in defense regardless, and they're going to take 500 during each of our standby phases, so we could slowly do burn damage of 15 and 500, 15 and 500 every turn, and whittle away at their life points a lot faster than normal, while also boosting our skill. We're going to draw into Zoma. They're going to set Zoma, they're going to flip Dekoichi, draw into a Dekoichi, set Dekoichi, and pass. It's so crazy how they can get the advantage like that. But anyways, standby phase are going to take 5. We could flip the other Nightmare Wheel on the Perfectly Ultimate, but I would like to save it just in case they come out with some type of answer to our plays. We're going to use our skill. Once again, this time we're going to get rid of the Nightmare Wheel. We're going to have Swordswoman swing into the Perfectly Ultimate. They're going to take 15 to the face. We're going to get another counter off of that. Then we're going to pass. They draw into another Moth. They flip Dekoichi. They're drawn to Doria. They have their Dekoichi swing into our Amazon. I'm not really sure what the play was here, unless it was to just free up space for this. But that's assuming it would survive. Them doing this gives us 2 counters, which I'm not really sure was smart on their part. Standby phase are going to take another 5, so even if they only had 1 swing in, they'd still have 3 counters because of that Nightmare Wheel. We're actually just going to hit a card in their hand. We could pop this, but the risk is, I feel like, I mean, it worked out because Zoma was down. If we try to swing for game, they'd Zoma, and then we'd kind of be back to where we started. I'd rather just have this be guaranteed game. Like, they would need to have Nightmare Wheel or bust in this situation, versus other back row that they could have. And as long as we have Nightmare Wheel on their Perfectly Ultimate, we're still doing damage. So in this situation, it worked out perfectly. We just kept it on the field. We swung into it. They didn't have the Nightmare Wheel, and that was game. So Swordswoman plays a big part in this, in just the simple fact of They put Big Beat Stick on the field, we redirect all that damage back to their life points. They're going to set Dekoichi into back row. We're going to draw into Nightmare Wheel. Like I said, Sage, man, Sage is the best. Like, Sage applies so much defense. In this situation, you know, you have 4 back row. I feel like keeping the 1 that destroys extra cards will save it. Floodgate's usually one of those cards where it's dead if you draw it anywhere outside of turn 1 or turn 2, assuming they haven't summoned their Big Beat Stick yet. So I'd like to keep that down. Wheel is too clutch, and I'd want to keep 1 thing that destroys things, so at least Dust Tornado pops face up and face down. We're going to have Sage swing in. Sage is going to get their effect. Both of these are a Zoma and a Dust Tornado, so they're going to let us YOLO, and they're going to play off whichever one we don't pop. And so we pop the Dust Tornado, so they get Zoma at the end phase. Kind of risky on their part, but I understand it. It's not like if they had used Dust Tornado and blinded there, then they would have lost both their cards, so they might as well keep 1 and make sure that the blind Dust Tornado doesn't end up hurting them in the long run. We're going to Paranoid the Sage. We're going to Dust Tornado that. They're going to use Cocoon's effect to shuffle the Paranoid back into the deck and draw 1. They're going to activate a Lure, banishing a Dekoichi, so they have 2 Nidorias and a Zoma. They're going to go into battle phase and have Nidoria swing over Sage. Interesting. We could have wheeled, but we don't really see the point to it. We get rid of the Doria this way. We can get rid of the Zoma through Wild Tornado. In fact, we can actually take the 18 and give ourselves a counter. We actually get 2 counters. We get 1 for the 200 they took and 1 for the 18 there. So we're going to go into our draw phase. We hit Offerings to the Doomed. The only downside is that we don't have a monster now. But technically they don't have a monster either. We're going to Offerings instead and keep the Wild Tornado for if they draw the Paranoid or something else, or like this in this situation, another Zoma. Keep in mind we can't draw, however, so we are playing 1 card behind. However, that Moth is dead in their hand, so we're not completely screwed. I'm going to Wild Tornado the Zoma, but like I said, this Wheel and this Floodgate isn't going to do anything. We're just going to pass. We're going to draw into Dekoichi, and once again, it's one of those things where you just have to keep card advantage, but they have the card advantage. We're gonna Nightmare Wheel the Dekoichi in the standby phase. So they take 500, putting a counter on her card and forcing it to not be able to flip. Whether we know it's Dekoichi or Nidoria is irrelevant. At this point, we're just playing on the simple fact that it's either the last Nidoria or the last Dekoichi, because the other Dekoichis are here. Either way, it's something where we'd use this if they're gonna attack the following turn. We don't really want a Floodgate on that. So I'd rather not, if it is Dekoichi, have them be able to flip it and get an extra draw. So I'm going to draw Wheel and pass. It's kind of working out in our favor. They're going to take 5. We're going to get another counter. Then we're going to use our skill, discarding a card from their hand, and we're going to pass. Reason we don't Swordswoman here is in case this is a Nightmare Wheel, which in fact it is. If they Nightmare Wheel us to death, they have higher life points, so we'd rather wait on that. We have 2 Floodgates trapped face down, so we're not too worried about what they're going to summon in attack mode. Standby phase, they take another 500, but they're still 100 higher than us, so we figure we just pass. I'm going to draw in a Wild Tornado, set that and pass. Standby phase, they're going to take another 500, and at this point we feel it's free enough to summon this, but we're actually going to wait another turn. Again, we have Floodgates, we're absolutely okay. They're going to Wild Tornado, so now they can flip their Dekoichi. They draw into a Nightmare Wheel, and they swing for 14. That does put a 3rd counter on our Twisted. We're going to draw into Sage. We're going to use our Twisted's effect to get rid of the Dekoichi just because we're so low on life. We're going to summon Sage and swing. They're going to Nightmare Wheel that. So we're going to pass. We don't want to set a 3rd Floodgate. We don't want to lock ourselves here. On the standby phase, we take 5 off the wheel, and then they flip another wheel for game, unfortunately. So finally, Moth gets a game on us, and we're tied this match 1-1. But we still have the upper hand, and as you've seen, we've been able to at least play the numbers game with this deck enough to make it an interesting game. So it's one of those things, again, where, like, you just have to out-advantage it, and I know that's really tough, because its advantage is just easily better than every other deck's advantage. But with something like this, and extra, and the effect damage you can deal, or the battle damage you can redirect off Swordswoman and stuff, as long as your cards all do one thing, you can rival their deck where all their cards do one thing. Unfortunately, their skill is better than yours, but your skill can slowly gain extra counters to get rid of their field. It's just a matter of time versus theirs can be used right away. They're going to end phase double Zoma here, which is kind of clutch. We do have Dust Tornado and Offerings, however, so we do have the outs to that. They're going to set Dekoichi, switch both of these to attack mode, swing into our Sage, and we're going to Dust Tornado the first one. We could Offerings the second one, keeping this up here to keep refueling this, but the thing is, Sage isn't going to do anything. And while we could set this and then try to have Sage attack, assuming this gets flipped the following turn, we're not going to be able to swing over either one of these, unless it's Nidorya, but even so, then Nidorya will just destroy it. So we figure it's not really worth saving. We'd rather have our draw phase than use Offerings on the Zoma. We draw into Nightmare Wheel, which is a pretty clutch card. We're going to Offerings the Zoma so we can set these two. We're going to have Zoma swing in. They're going to get one draw, then we're going to pass. They're going to set Dekoichi, Dust, and Zoma and pass once again. See, it's really crazy. You think you knocked it out, and then they set 3 cards again. Dekoichi lets them draw again. Now they're stuck on both Moths once again. They're going to flip Zoma in the end phase. They're going to draw into Dust Tornado. They're going to Dust Tornado our Zoma, so that gets rid of that play. Flips their Zoma to attack mode. They're going to try to swing. We're going to take the damage because it does put us up to 3 counters so we can get rid of Zoma with the skill versus our back row. We're going to use the skill, getting rid of the Zoma. Set Dust Tornado, and now we're on Wheel Tornado and Dust Tornado. Not a bad field. They draw on a Paranoid, which is going to be dead. Not even just because we don't have a monster, but because they have both Moths in hand. We're going to flip Dust Tornado, destroying their face down. They're going to chain their Dust Tornado, destroying one of our cards. Unfortunately, they get rid of our Nightmare Wheel. We're going to set Floodgate, pass. They're going to draw on a wheel and set it. And it's just like a back and forth. The problem is they have 4,000 R13, so they are easily defeating us in card advantage and life points. This Nightmare Wheel is going to almost secure it. We're actually going to let it go. We have Wild Tornado, but putting another counter on this, we have a little bit of life points to play with. The thing is, if we Wild Tornado this and then they Paranoid us, not knowing that they have both dead in their hand, the unfortunate part there is that we'd have nothing to stop them. So, we take 5 off of that. They're actually going to summon Paranoid, which is interesting. With that logic, we assume they're going to equip a Paranoid because they have the Moths in hand, which is a good assumption here because they actually do. So we're going to Floodgate that, which is a little risky. Actually, I probably should have seen it through a little bit more because the only downside to that is that if they have this swing in with a Paranoid equipped and the Paranoid goes in the damage step, they can use this effect to summon this, and in the damage step, we're not allowed to use this. So our thought process was, let's flip it face down now. Hopefully that works out for us. We're going to set Dust Tornado, we're going to Wild Tornado the Nightmare Wheel. Now we have another out to a Paranoid, so now we don't have to waste it. Let's get rid of their Paranoid on field and see what they can do with that. Now, their turn, they equip Paranoid to Swordswoman. So the logic here is if last turn they really did have both Moths and that's why they did that, then we shouldn't do anything. We should just wait. But if we don't do anything and then they flip this and summon a Moth from deck, assuming we don't know that both of these are in here, we just straight lose. And this is for the match. So, thinking about it, I flip the Dust Tornado to destroy it. They then get their thing. They then allure they YOLO allure, which I understand with the logic of let's shuffle this back in if the allure doesn't hit it, so that Annoyed would be live. But at the life points that I'm at, I probably have preferred to just keep some of these and waited for a Dark Monster. But they do lose all 3. They then use the skill, shuffle the Moth back in, draw a card. Ends up being Offerings anyways, and that's clutch as heck because then they could just pop our Swordswoman, go into battle phase, and swing directly for game, which is really unfortunate. Because at least, if that didn't happen, they would have taken the 2,000, we would have been on top deck mode, but we wouldn't have straight died. I wish we'd flipped the top card there. I'm not actually sure what we would have hit. But no, instead, they top decked the Offerings, which they side in, off that one draw, so there goes that match. It's crazy how that happened. It's really crazy. But they definitely had the match for sure there. So, going into match 3. Now match is tied at 1 apiece. Sage puts in work, as you can see right here, as always. Then they're going to Anoint it, then they're going to get rid of it, then they're going to summon the Moth. We're going to Floodgate that. They're going to use Cocoon's other effect, shuffle this thing back in. Getting an Allure, hitting an Allure, banishing a Dekoichi, setting up their board. They're going to tribute the Moth for the Gap, which is actually really strong. We're going to straight Offerings of that. We just don't want that on the field. The way it seems to be ruled is that things can still be switched to defense mode while this is up, but they immediately go back to attack mode. It's not like it prevents it completely. I thought it did. I don't know if I've done that in a previous video where I didn't flip something I could have, but you can like Floodgate this, for example. Or you can Sphere it and then it just goes back to attack mode. So it's a little annoying. Here's a perfect example. So we can Floodgate this, so Gap goes face down. We have Nightmare Wheel and Nightmare Wheel. And we draw into Swordswoman. I don't want to summon the Swordswoman, just on the logic of if we summon the Swordswoman and flip this face up, even if it doesn't go, even if it can't switch its battle position off Floodgate, I don't want the ability to be live with everything right now. We got 2 Nightmare Wheels, so we can sit for a little bit. We're going to Nightmare Wheel Midoriya, we're going to Nightmare Wheel Zoma, giving us 2 counters in our standby phase, assuming both burn go through. We're going to summon Swordswoman at this point and pass. We draw into Dust Tornado, which is nice. So at least we have an out to Zoma if we need it. Going into our standby phase, we do another 2 burns. We're only going to get 1 counter because it maxes at 3. But we're going to then use the skill to YOLO a card in their hand. We hit Paranoid. They're going to Nightmare Wheel at the end phase, which seems a little risky on their part, but I guess they wanted to start getting damage done. But it gives us more counters, which is why I'm surprised they do it. Granted, I guess here, we're only going to get 1 counter based off of this. But they do Dust Tornado anyways, so I'm not really sure what the point of that was with the Nightmare Wheel. So we're going to get rid of Midoriya. We're going to set Zoma. And we're just going to pass once again. As long as we're doing this burn damage, we don't really need to go out of our way for this. This is stuck face down, so we might as well keep it to them having 2 zones for monsters. They're going to actually have Midoriya swing into this, and they're going to have Paranoid go onto this. And then, so Midoriya will die. I guess we should have Dust Tornadoed this. My thought process was Moth will come out, but they didn't have any zones open, so I didn't think about it. So Midoriya is actually going to pop Swordswoman, and then the Moth comes out at 35, and that's enough for game, but we do have a Zoma, thank God. So don't botch that up. Keep in mind, we're still doing burn damage with Nightmare Wheel here, so it puts 3 counters on that. We get rid of the Moth. They're at 700 life. We put Zoma to attack mode. We have Zoma swing into Zoma, which would be game, and they don't have a way to stop that. So that's that. So can we seal the deal and win a freaking match? That is the question. At least we start up. They're gonna set the world. We're gonna draw. We got our best boy, or best girl, I guess. For these situations, they're gonna be forced to Nightmare Wheel. That's fine with us. That gives us counters. End phase, they're gonna Zoma. They still got a Dust Tornado. We got Floodgate, Zoma, and Wild Tornado. They're gonna Dust Tornado YOLO. Popping our Wild Tornado. We're gonna chain that, getting rid of Zoma. We could have actually let it die and pop a face-up card in the field, but it would have resulted the same. They're gonna Paranoid our Sage. We're gonna let it go. They're gonna Cocoon this thing, and they're gonna summon their Moth. We're gonna Floodgate that. They're gonna get their draw. They're gonna set Offerings and pass. They draw into the other Moth. We draw into Floodgate or Zoma. I'm not sure which, but now we have both. In phase, we Zoma. I just kind of want to put it in attack mode. Like, the thing is, we can't kill this as long as, you know, it's on the board walling them, but I'd rather have this be face up in case they summon Midoriya or Dekoichi. We have Wild Tornado and Floodgate just in case. They draw into Gap and they pass. Kind of like they can sit on this as long as possible. They don't need the Gap to be on the field. Plus, if it's face up, it's more susceptible to cards like Offerings and stuff. We're gonna pass. We could summon Sage, swing it into this, take 1600, put a counter on this, and get rid of one of their back row, but life points is everything right now. Now they're gonna Gap. We're gonna Floodgate that face down. Now we can do it with Sage and it actually take less damage, but again, we're kind of just sitting pretty here. We can sit until, you know, something's relevant. They're going to Paranoid the Zoma. Keep in mind they've used the skill, then they're going to Dust Tornado the Paranoid so they can get their Moth out. They're going to Offerings their Zoma, and they're going to swing for 35. And guys, we don't have an out to that. Both of our things destroys back row. So the Zoma, we don't have the Zoma on the field. We can't actually stop this, which is really unfortunate. So we take 35 to the game. It's really unfortunate. I really wish I had Zoma down for that. So unfortunately, we have to force a game 3 and try desperately once again to crawl back from the clutches of defeat against the ultimate Moth deck. Setting the world as usual. I'm not really sure if the second wants to go first or second. When you draw the Amazons, it's almost like you want to go second with it. But setting up Zoma is so clutch that I feel like going first is still worth it, considering Moth would rather go first. But giving them the extra draw is also scary. We start out with decent field here. So Swordswoman will swing. I don't know why there's a counter on Swordswoman. The counter should be on Twisted. But they're going to Dust Tornado or Zoma. Then they're going to End Phase Zoma. They're going to Paranoid the Amazon. They're going to get their Moth. We're going to Floodgate that Moth, but then Paranoid goes off, summoning another Moth, which is really unfortunate. Switch Zoma to attack mode, have Zoma swinging for 18. There, we got the counters right. Now, perfectly going to swing. We're going to Nightmare Wheel that. We're going to go into standby phase. Nightmare Wheel does 500. We get the third counter on it. We'll get rid of the Moth. We're going to set 2 cards and pass. We're going to set Dekoichi, set another face down, have Zoma swing. We're going to Dust Tornado that. We're going to keep Wild Tornado down in case they want to blind Dust Tornado this way. It'll pop a face-up card. We'll set Nightmare Wheel and pass. They'll flip Dekoichi, get another card, set a Dekoichi, have Dekoichi swing. We're going to Nightmare Wheel that. They're going to Dust Tornado it. So we're going to take 14, and we are at 800 life points, guys. Can we come back? Can we come back? We draw Offerings. Is it going to be enough? They flip Dekoichi, get another card, set a Wild Tornado swing. We're going to Offerings that one, but unfortunately, we cannot stop the second one. So that's that. Unfortunately, once again, we can't win the 2 out of 3 matches. As far as the Dark Moth build is concerned, it's the same we did in the last video. Double this, double Moth, double Gap, triple Paranoid, triple Dekoichi, triple Newdoria, double Allure, triple Zoma, triple Wheel, triple Dust Tornado. Standard. Honestly, I've been playing this build and it's just been perfect against everything. Side deck is a Hades, a Golden Ladybug. This is more or less for Nidoria's mirror matches. This is for Time, and it's an Insect. This is a Sphere Karibo because it's decent. This is a DD Crow because Screw Relinquished, and a few other things. Offerings of the Doomed is a 1-of, Wild Tornado is a 1-of. There's not much explanations I need for this deck, it's just kind of insane. For Amazons, we were playing triple Sage, triple Swordswoman. I wouldn't change this at all. I just wish there was an Amazon in this game that was actually good as a third Amazon. Trainees, whatever right now, and Spy does nothing. Double Offerings to the Doomed. I'd play Heirloom, but the fact that I need to have one of these for Heirloom to be relevant is pretty bad, so I'd rather play this. And Village I never draw when I have these, plus we're only playing 6 of them. Having the Village almost ends up always being dead. So then it's 3 Zoma, 3 Nightmare Wheel, 3 Dust Tornado as standard, 3 Floodgate Trap Hole, and double Wild Tornado. Having 5 Spell and Trap Hates plus Sage is real clutch, as you could see through the matches. Unfortunately, we didn't win the matches, all 3 matches, but you can see why that's still relevant. And Floodgate's really good to slow them down for sure. In the side deck, we have the 1 Lava Golem, which pairs really well with Swordswoman for extra free damage and burn. 1 Sasuke Samurai. I sided this in once and never saw it, so unfortunately I don't get to show you guys how cool this can be, but against Dark Moth specifically, they set a lot of defenses. You can summon this thing and just blow up their defenses before they'll flip, which is nice. Gets rid of the Newdoria and the Dekoichi. Also, if you Floodgate something like Perfectly Ultimate, then summon this and swing into it, it gets rid of it for free off the field. So it can be clutch, but we never drew it when we had it in, so unfortunately I couldn't show you guys how cool that is. 1 Crow, 2 Sphere Karibo, and 1 Mask of the Accursed. This was nice. We didn't bring this in at I think I sided it in once and I didn't see it, but this can also be really good. Extra little way to slow down the opponent. It's basically Nightmare Wheel in the spell card, so it's a little worse, but still slows them down. But unfortunately, we couldn't get the job done, so we're 0 for 2 on decks against Dark Moth this week. So I don't know, guys. What do you think? Leave your comments down below. Maybe the third video will be the charm. Maybe we can get a deck to actually win all 3 of the matches, or maybe it'll 2-0 match it. That'd be great. Please comment, like, and subscribe. As always, click the notification bell to get all of our latest updates. You guys know the drill. But that's all from me today, guys. I'll see you guys in the next video. Yugi Bros out.